Fred Dobb and Connie Hanson to come forward to present our nomination of the 2016 Steward of God's Creation Award.
It is really an honor and delight for those of us to nominate Reverend Dr. Margaret Bullitt-Jonas for the 2016 Steward of God's Creation Award. I've known Margaret for well over a decade in eco-justice and know her as you do as an ordained priest in the Episcopal Church, serving many years as a parish priest, now missioner of creation care for both the Episcopal Diocese of Western Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Conference of the United Church of Christ. It's a tremendous, tremendous work. She's a writer, she's an organizer, a spiritual director, a retreat leader, and an activist, and who over the last 15 years has she's put her body and her reputation on the line on several acts of civil disobedience among other clergy, and that dealing with human justice and environmental justice. To me, and I wrote some of these things, I'm a preacher, if I don't have notes, I'm out of here, you're out of here. At the heart of it, Margaret is a contemplative activist. And I use this phrase to describe her because this is the primary reason I'm so glad that she's receiving this award. There are a lot of people who are activists and they do their great work and say a prayer every once in a while, and that's really good. And there are people who are contemplative and who spend time searching within the soul and the significance of all of that. Margaret is one that combines these two things. She goes deep within her own soul, her own spirit, to understand what the sacred, what God, what the holy is doing. And then she's active. And then with that activist comes back. It's a back and forth. And to me, Margaret is one who reminds me not just to do one or the other, to do both. And so it gives me great delight to be one of the nominees, or the nominators for Margaret Bullitt-Jonas.
Margaret is amazing. I could go on. Is it on? Okay.
Yep.
I Googled Margaret's name on the internet, and so many sites came up. And I read a lot of them, and I could go on for an hour, which I won't, about Margaret just from reading. So I really suggest that you just Google her name, because you will find out so much about her that we can't possibly even share right now. We don't have the time. And you can also find some of her wonderful sermons also. If you Google her name and just follow, you can find her sermons. On a personal level, Margaret is one of the, if not the most patient person I've ever met. A year ago, 7 of us worked on a letter to the President and a letter to Congress. There were 7 of us scattered all over the country. And so we did it all by, Dave sitting here, Richard, many of us, and we did it all by email and by conference calls. And Margaret was our chair. So you can imagine 7 people, and then we got input from the NRCCC, all the members. You can imagine 7 people and then getting input from everyone else, all of our suggestions and corrections and additions, and Margaret just was patient through the whole thing. Patient and harmonious. It was amazing, truly. I mean, I would have lost it so far back, Margaret. And she even went on vacation and even kept up with all of us and was working to finally get it done while she was on her vacation. And so, Margaret, not only are you brilliant, but you're loving and kind and so harmonizing and patient. So I'm just going to end with 2 Bible verses. One is from Matthew, and I just think this applies to Margaret. These are Jesus' words from Matthew 25:23. Better put my glasses on. Matthew 25:23. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Well done, good and faithful servant. And then a blessing from Zephaniah from the Old Testament, Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is mighty to save. He rejoices over you with joy. He quiets you with his love. He rejoices over you with singing.
The question is asked by the rabbis when they're reading early in the book of Exodus, why Moses? What is it about this one dude that makes him the mantle for the themes of liberation? And the answer given is Moshe ish anav ma'od. He was a very humble man. Humility is the prerequisite for great leadership. That's something that a lot of us preachers, in particular, don't have quite enough of. It is something that is a central attribute for Margaret's incredible leadership, and the fact that she can do so much building on these themes. And I've often, whenever I read about praxis, this dance between theory and action, as Tom said, I come back to Margaret's shining example. I had the honor 15 years ago to be a co-chair with her of an interfaith environmental activist group, and I can vouch that she does indeed harmonize, and that the acoustics of a jail cell actually, the harmony sounds really good. Really good. But there were 4 of us, and it was 3 rather impulsive, hot-headed, itchy to do something people, and Margaret. There were 3 folks who wanted to be out there, but weren't always stopping to take the deep breath and reflect, and there was Margaret. And the fact that she has done so much, the fact that she has helped to pioneer what it can look like to turn around legacy institutions, to open space in something as old and sacred and often bound in its ways as a diocesan structure, to become a missioner of creation care. That alone is groundbreaking. It is pioneering in this field. So for someone who ever bears religious witness for the earth, it is such an honor to say, and let it be the Jew in testimony who cites the adage, teach the gospel always, when necessary, use words. That is Reverend Margaret Bullitt-Jonas.
Oh, there you are. Just a minute.
They said to come up.
They said to come up.
Yes.
What we want to do is we want Margaret to present you the Steward of God's Creation Award. In 2016, the Reverend Margaret Bullitt-Jonas presented in acknowledgement of exemplary initiative, devotion, and leadership and service to God's good earth, the National Religious Coalition on Creation Care. Margaret, blessed be. Got to get a picture.
Get a picture. Very nice.
We hear she's a terrific spray painter.
Look this way.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. And
Look this way.
thank you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have a word to say.
I have a word to say.
Yes, good.
I have a word to say. I had dinner last night with our son and Jonas, who's here, and we started talking about the awfulness of blushing, how embarrassing it is to blush. But I will just stand here blushing before you to say how touched I am by everything you've said. I feel very seen and known and loved, and that is one of the deep joys that we can give each other, is to see each other and know each other and love each other. Maybe I'll just say, I have this whole thing I could say, but I think I'll never mind the text. What I find so touching about being with all of you is that you understand why we're here, that what a gift it is to be alive, and to be alive at a time when our choices make such a difference. in my work as a climate activist, which is decades long, I've had so many moments of being overwhelmed, as I know you have too, with the size of the challenge before us. You know, I think of Bill McKibben's book, Earth, where he says something like, today the world is burning, flooding, acidifying, drying, in ways that no human being has ever seen before. So we have a sense of being at a
So I'm very interested in how do we help ourselves, how do we help each other to find practices to help us stay strong, to stay creative, to stay fully alive, so that we can bring our whole selves and our best selves to this great work that we have before us.
And our best selves to this great work that we have before us. So I developed a very simple framework for the heart. And I actually started thinking about it as I walked out of jail with Rabbi Fred and this little group of us that got arrested in front of the Department of Energy here in D.C. back in 2001. Trying to understand what had led me to the point of civil disobedience and what would sustain me in the years ahead.
It's about cultivating an awakened heart, allowing, accepting a broken heart, and nourishing a radiant heart. So awakened, broken, and radiant. What is an awakened heart? An awakened heart is a heart that is open to love, that is repeatedly and more deeply touched by the power of love. I think all the world's religious practices, in a way, come down to how can we help human beings to open their heart, to awaken their heart. So practices of gratitude, practices of mindfulness, almost any practice you can think of, a spiritual religious practice, is a practice of opening the heart to touch into that deep love that sent us into the world, that is with us and will welcome us home at our journey's end. Very, very important that we stay rooted and grounded in love. Because in the midst of this crisis, there's such, you hear voices that say things like human beings are a cancer on the planet. You hear voices that say things like human beings are a cancer on the planet. Human beings are like a virus. And I really, really understand that the rage and the grief that propels images like that, because it is true that our economic systems, our technologies, there are many ways in which our structures are in fact bringing down life on this planet. But we need to stay grounded in love. That kind of self-hatred is never going to lead us toward a better future. So keeping an awakened heart, everything we can do, just welcoming this breath, gift. A broken heart is when we allow ourselves to feel our grief about what's happening. We don't want to go there. Of course we don't want to go there. And as Joanna Macy, the wonderful Buddhist teacher, philosopher, points out, we can't help it. We may not want to go to that place of brokenheartedness, but we can't help it. We're all connected, and pain over here is felt, it ripples around the world. And there's so many reasons we repress the pain. We don't want to look morbid. We don't want to look sentimental. We don't want to look weak. We don't want to bring other people down. We don't want to get other people worried. So we try to repress the pain. But when we are willing to accept a broken heart, we allow the love we feel for each other, for life, for the planet, for our children. We allow that love to break open our heart, and we find ways to feel the grief. And people of faith are blessed because I think all religions give us ways of working with suffering. How do you work with suffering? How do you work with that grief without getting overwhelmed?
Working with suffering. How do you work with suffering? How do you work with that grief without getting overwhelmed? As a Christian, the place I go to is the cross, which for me is the place where all of human weakness and sorrow and fear and anger and malice is perpetually being met by the love of God. It's that place where whatever we bring, whatever we feel, is met by this tender, powerful, vulnerable love. And a good thing about feeling our vulnerability is that it builds community. As we accept our brokenness and admit how much we care and how much we weep and grieve and feel anger about what's happening, that's how we can connect with each other.
So that's a broken heart. So as we stay rooted and grounded in love with an awakened heart, and as we accept the broken heart, we then move into a radiant heart, which is all the ways that we manifest this love that we have discovered and that we abide with day by day. And what we do, so the radiant heart is how do you bear witness to this love that you've known? And I just think of all the people in this room doing what you're doing. You know, we recycle, we do what we can to live more lightly and reduce our carbon footprint. And we not only do those individual acts that build our own integrity and take responsibility for our own little piece of being a blessing on the earth, we also connect with each other and we do what we can to create the systemic change that is so needed. So political engagement, political involvement, and for some of us, civil disobedience and protesting on the streets.
For some of us, civil disobedience and protesting on the streets. I'm very aware that we're standing today with the folks at Moral Monday. You know, that movement that's been growing for the last 3 years, starting in North Carolina. It's this whole movement of saying it's a moral, racism and poverty is part of the work that people of faith need to be about. And there are events happening today all over the country for Moral Monday. And I like to imagine that the environmental and the climate movement will become increasingly integral to the quest for social justice and racial justice and economic justice. That's part of our work as people with radiant hearts. Tomorrow there are going to be demonstrations all around the country around the Dakota Access Pipeline. So I give so much thanks for the people of faith who are rising up around the country saying that.
And the last thing I'll say is, one thing I've noticed about myself is just because I'm busy does not mean that I'm manifesting a radiant heart. I can get really busy and there's nothing radiant about it. So I've learned to ask myself, Margaret, are you doing too much and running too fast because you think you have to prove your worth, you have to prove you're good enough, or that your life has some meaning? When I've noticed that in myself, then I go back to the awakened heart place. It's about going back to that place of knowing that each of us is intimately and infinitely the beloved of God.
Each of us is intimately and infinitely the beloved of God. So that there are times we just need to go sit and dwell in our being God's love, beloved. And then there are other times when I find myself racing around when I realize the reason I'm doing it is I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. I don't want to.
And when I notice that's what's going on, I go back to the broken heart place of I need to sit at the cross, I need to, whatever the imagery is that works, but I need to be close to that tender, powerful love of God and let myself feel what I feel. And then from that place, because I've re-immersed myself in the love of God, I'm not afraid of what I feel, then off we go. Again, manifesting that radiant heart. So I thank you for all the ways in which all of you in this room are manifesting an awakened heart and accepting a broken heart and allowing that radiant heart to shine. And I thank you so much for this award, which I find deeply touching.